Sit back and enjoy 2 hours of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started. Standing under a manchineel tree while it is raining is a bad idea because its toxins are water-soluble. Every part of the manchineel tree is poisonous and can kill you. This tree grows in tropical regions of the Americas and the Caribbean, and its milky sap can cause severe irritation and blistering when it comes into contact with the skin. Even raindrops passing through its leaves can carry irritating substances. Its fruit resembles a small green apple and should not be eaten either. 1 kilogram of uranium-235 used in nuclear fission generates the same amount of energy as 2.7 million kilograms of coal. The enormous difference is due to the extraordinary energy density of nuclear fuel. When a uranium-235 nucleus splits, it releases energy and several neutrons that can trigger additional fissions, creating a controlled chain reaction inside a reactor. This is why a nuclear power plant can operate for long periods using relatively small amounts of fuel compared with a fossil fuel power plant. Grapes and raisins are highly toxic to dogs. Even relatively small amounts can cause serious poisoning in some animals, although sensitivity varies considerably from one dog to another. For years, it was not known for certain which component was responsible, but veterinary research has identified tartaric acid as the likely cause. Poisoning can cause vomiting, loss of appetite, weakness, and, in the most severe cases, acute kidney failure. Raisins can be especially problematic because their components become more concentrated as they lose water during drying. Anyone in the United States can apply to get a free horse through the Wild Horse and Burro program, as long as they have the means to house and care for it. The program is administered by the Bureau of Land Management and aims to find suitable homes for animals removed from public lands in the western United States. Applicants must meet specific requirements regarding facilities, transportation, and care. In addition, there is an incentive program that can provide up to $1,000 to people who adopt certain eligible horses or burros and meet the established conditions. Dr. Kruger was the man who discovered that sections of our brain can fall asleep while we remain conscious. Researcher James Kruger and his team studied how small groups of neurons can temporarily enter sleep-like states without the entire brain falling asleep at the same time. This phenomenon is known as local sleep and can occur more easily after prolonged periods of wakefulness. Even while a person appears awake, some regions of the brain may briefly display patterns associated with sleep, which can affect attention and performance on certain tasks. The first recorded separation of conjoined twins took place in the Byzantine Empire in the 900s. One of the twins was already dead, and the other lived for 3 days after the separation. The next recorded separation occurred several centuries later, in 1689, by Johannes Fazio. Alex Stepney, an English soccer goalkeeper, became so angry with his own teammates that he literally dislocated his jaw while shouting at them. The unusual incident occurred in 1975 while he was playing for Manchester United against Birmingham City. Stepney was scolding his defenders when he opened his mouth so forcefully that he dislocated his jaw and had to leave the field. Because substitutions were much more limited at the time, defender Brian Greenhoff ended up playing goalkeeper for the rest of the match. There is a Japanese word, tsunboku, which means buying a book but letting it pile up and never reading it. The term originated during the Meiji era, between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and combines concepts related to piling things up and reading books. It does not necessarily mean abandoning reading altogether, but rather acquiring books with the intention of reading them someday, while the collection of unread books continues to grow. Today, the word is also used outside Japan to describe those piles of unread books that end up occupying shelves, desks, and nightstands. A man was killed by a beaver while trying to photograph it. The man spotted the beaver while fishing with friends, approached it, and the beaver bit him in the thigh, severing an artery. Tragically, the man's friends were unable to stop the blood loss. We have tiny crystals in our ears that can become dislodged and cause severe vertigo, known as benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, or BPPV. These tiny calcium carbonate crystals, called otoconia, are normally located in part of the inner ear and help the brain detect movement and gravity. When some of them become dislodged and enter the semicircular canals, they can cause brief but intense episodes of vertigo when the head moves. A technique known as the Epley maneuver can be used to move them back to an area where they no longer cause symptoms. The Vernon C. Bain Correctional Center was a floating prison with a capacity of about 800 people, docked off Rikers Island in New York City. It began operating in 1992 and stopped housing inmates in November 2023. In November 2025, the vessel was removed from New York and transported to Louisiana for dismantling. Sheep and goats can mate to produce a sheep-goat hybrid called a geep. These births are extremely rare because, although the two species are related, sheep have 54 chromosomes and goats have 60. The few confirmed hybrids usually display a combination of physical characteristics from both animals, such as coat type, body shape, or certain features of the head. Most have reproductive problems, although exceptional cases of hybrids that became fertile have been documented. Malabar giant squirrels can measure up to 3 feet from head to tail. They live primarily in the forests of India and spend much of their lives in the treetops, where they rarely need to come down to the ground. Their long tails help them maintain balance as they move between branches, and they can make jumps of several feet. In addition to their large size, they are known for their striking fur, which can combine shades of brown, reddish tones, black, and cream. Beauty parlor stroke syndrome is a type of stroke that can occur because of poor neck positioning, such as when having your hair washed at a beauty salon. It is an extremely rare phenomenon and has been linked to prolonged hyperextension or rotation of the neck over the edge of a shampoo basin. In some cases, this position can affect the arteries that carry blood to the brain. The term began appearing in medical literature during the 1990s after several cases associated with this position were documented. The moon pose, which involves turning your back to the judges and bending forward from a standing position, is a pose that was banned in some bodybuilding competitions. When it was still allowed, it caused controversy among audiences because it was considered too provocative, which contributed to it no longer being accepted on stage. Strawberry Pop-Tarts are one of the most commonly purchased food items at Walmart during hurricane preparation. Academy Award nominee Robert Forster, who played the Extractor in Breaking Bad and in the Breaking Bad movie El Camino, passed away on the release date of El Camino. Police radio codes such as 10-4 for affirmative all begin with 10 to give the radio time to turn on. The first spoken syllable of a transmission was often not understood because of quirks in older technology. Officers were trained to wait after pressing the transmitter, but they would forget when they were in a hurry. Polaris, the North Star, is only between 45 and 67 million years old. It did not exist during the age of the dinosaurs. Despite being relatively young in astronomical terms, it is a much larger and more luminous star than the Sun and is part of a multiple star system. Polaris is also a Cepheid variable, a class of star that changes slightly in brightness following a regular pattern. Its position as the North Star is not permanent either. Because of the slow movement of Earth's axis, other stars occupied that position in the past and will do so again in the future. George Lucas wanted Muppets creator Jim Henson to voice the character of Yoda in Star Wars. Henson was unable to participate because of other commitments and recommended Frank Oz, one of his most important collaborators. Oz ended up providing Yoda's voice and also operated the character as a puppeteer in The Empire Strikes Back, released in 1980. Bringing the small Jedi Master to life required several operators who coordinated his eyes, ears, hands, and expressions while Oz controlled the head and voice. Earth's magnetic field was approximately twice as strong during Roman times as it is now. Scientists can reconstruct its ancient intensity by studying archaeological materials such as pottery, bricks, and clay objects that were heated to high temperatures. As they cooled, certain minerals preserved a kind of record of the direction and intensity of the magnetic field that existed at the time. These studies have also revealed that Earth's magnetic field is constantly changing, and that its intensity can increase or decrease considerably over the centuries. When Jimi Hendrix first performed in front of Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and members of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, their reactions included profanity, Jesus, and demons. The world's longest light rail line is located in Los Angeles. The A Line, formerly known as the Blue Line, runs approximately 48 miles from Long Beach through downtown Los Angeles to Azusa. The complete trip from one end to the other takes about 2 hours. Viruses called Pandora viruses and some bacteria were found frozen in 30,000-year-old permafrost, which is soil that remained continuously frozen in Siberia. Some of these giant viruses were successfully reactivated under controlled laboratory conditions after remaining trapped for tens of thousands of years. The specimens studied primarily infect amoebas and pose no known threat to humans. Permafrost also preserves remains of ancient plants, animals, and microorganisms, making it a kind of natural archive that allows researchers to study ecosystems and forms of life from the distant past. The Gentoo penguin can reach speeds of up to about 22 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest penguins underwater. Its streamlined body and powerful flippers allow it to move with great agility while pursuing fish, krill, and squid. It can also dive to depths of more than 328 feet and remain underwater for several minutes. Unlike many birds, its bones are relatively dense, a characteristic that makes diving easier and reduces buoyancy. The British government protected the supply of fish and chips during both World War I and World War II. It was one of the few foods that was not subject to rationing in the United Kingdom during the wars. A zeptosecond is 1/1000th of 1/10000000th of a second. It is one of the smallest units of time ever measured directly in scientific experiments. A zeptosecond is equal to 1/6000th of a second, or 0.0 followed by 20 zeros and a 1. In 2020, researchers measured an interval of approximately 247 zeptoseconds while studying how long it took a photon to travel through a hydrogen molecule. These measurements make it possible to investigate physical phenomena that occur on extraordinarily small scales. Senior citizen Emmerich Jutner evaded the United States Secret Service for 10 years while using just enough poorly made counterfeit $1 bills to support himself and his dog. One version even misspelled Washington's name. He used only one counterfeit $1 bill at a time and never in the same place twice. He served 4 months in prison. The speed of light was accurately measured for the first time in 1676 by Danish astronomer Ole Romme during observations of Jupiter's moons without modern technology. Romme studied the eclipses of Io, one of Jupiter's moons, and noticed that they appeared to occur earlier or later depending on the distance between Earth and the planet. He concluded that light needed time to travel through space, contradicting the idea that it traveled instantaneously. His observations provided one of the first estimates of the speed of light and demonstrated that it had a finite speed. Lisa Meitner was a physicist who was nominated 19 times for the Nobel Prize in Chemistry between 1924 and 1948, and 30 times for the Nobel Prize in Physics between 1937 and 1967. She was never awarded a Nobel Prize and was instrumental in the discoveries related to nuclear fission. The earliest known reference to the so-called Mile High Club dates back to a betting book from 1785, just 2 years after the first successful crewed hot air balloon flight. Because of metal shortages during World War II, Oscar statuettes were made of painted plaster. During the 3 years following the war, the Academy invited recipients to exchange the plaster figures for gold-plated metal ones. In 2003, a man named Mike Rowe bought the domain MikeRoweSoft.com, which initially caused a legal dispute, but the case was later settled in exchange for an Xbox console and an all-expenses-paid trip to Microsoft headquarters. The Japanese captured the USS Stewart, the ghost ship of the Pacific, during World War II. After it had been scuttled, they raised it from the seafloor, repaired it, and commissioned it into the Japanese fleet, where it sailed throughout the Pacific performing escort duties. Ruth Brown, a rhythm and blues superstar of the 1950s, saw her record company withhold her earnings. She then spent several years working low-paying jobs until she made a comeback in 1976. She used her renewed fame to fight for musicians to receive royalties for their music. Angela Lansbury was initially hesitant to perform the title song from the 1991 movie Beauty and the Beast because of its unfamiliar style, and was especially concerned that her aging voice would not be strong enough to sustain the longer notes. In the end, she recorded it in a single take. United States Navy sailors during World War II drank torpedo juice, a mixture of 90-proof grain alcohol, torpedo fuel, and pineapple juice. Despite the Navy's attempts to make the alcohol undrinkable, sailors still found ways around it with varying degrees of effectiveness. The double rainbow guy, Paul Bear Vasquez, was a prolific creator who uploaded thousands of videos. He also scheduled 15 years of posts in advance before he died, leaving his channel active even after his death. Hurricane Bobag was a storm that struck Scotland in 2011 and got its name from the Scottish word for scrotum. In 1991, a warehouse in Wisconsin holding more than 4,000 tons of butter caught fire. After 5 hours, the melted butter flooded out and formed a river of butter that was between about 2 feet and nearly 3 feet deep, and up to about 5 feet deep in some places. The fire burned for 8 days. Drapetomania was a supposed mental illness, falsely proposed based on the belief that slavery was such an improvement in the lives of enslaved people that only those suffering from some form of mental illness would want to escape. Lucille Ball sent flowers to Carol Burnett on Burnett's birthday every year. The last year Burnett received flowers from Ball was 1989. That year, Burnett's birthday was also the day Ball died. The 11-pointed foundation of the Statue of Liberty is actually a coastal defense fort known as Fort Wood, which predates the rest of the pedestal by 73 years. The fort was built between 1808 and 1811 on the island now known as Liberty Island, and it was named in honor of military officer Eleazar D. Wood. Its distinctive star-shaped layout eventually served as the base for the statue's pedestal. Even today, the 11-pointed granite structure can be clearly seen around the monument. Tosca is one of the largest adult entertainment establishments in Europe. It has more than 120 workers and receives numerous visitors each day. The workers rent rooms inside the building and operate independently. Each floor has a different theme, with a variety of options and settings for different audiences. From the 1940s through the 1970s, pinball was actually banned in some of the largest cities in the United States because of claims that it was a mafia-run gambling scheme that corrupted young people. It was not until 1976, when an expert demonstrated in court that pinball was a game of skill rather than chance, that the ban was lifted in New York City. Since its invention in 1959, the MOSFET transistor has become the most produced artificial object in history, with more than 13 sextillion manufactured. Baldur's Gate 3 was the first video game to win all 5 major Game of the Year awards: Golden Joystick, the Game Awards, DICE, Game Developer's Choice, and the British Academy Games Award. Mouth-puffing occurs when patients continue trying to breathe through their mouths while sleeping, even after they have sealed their mouths shut with tape. People try this as a treatment for sleep apnea or snoring, but it is not a good idea. The UNIVAC-1 was the first computer to predict a United States presidential election, accurately forecasting Eisenhower's landslide victory for CBS, while the Gallup poll predicted a close race. The C-130 is the longest continuously produced military aircraft in history, having reached 70 years of production in 2024. The beehive hairstyle was also called a B-52 because of its resemblance to the nose of the Boeing B-52 bomber, and the band the B-52 Seconds chose that name because 2 of its members wore that hairstyle. The co-owner of Macy's and his wife died in the sinking of the Titanic. His wife refused to board a lifeboat and save herself, choosing instead to stay with her husband and go down with the ship. The founder of Oakley Sunglasses also founded Red Digital Cinema, the manufacturer of extremely high-end cinema cameras. Singer Avril Lavigne was banned from performing in Malaysia in 2008 because her concert was considered too provocative. However, the ban was lifted shortly afterward. Ironically, ethics books are substantially more likely to disappear from university libraries than books about other fields of philosophy. Coca-Cola was exempted from the sugar rationing of 1942 after promising service members a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents wherever they were. Before the 25th Amendment, there was no mechanism in the United States Constitution for filling vice presidential vacancies. The United States has been without a vice president on 16 occasions for a combined total of 37 years. In 2023, the Iowa Pork Producers Association launched an advertising campaign featuring 4 Iowa State football players: Miles Purchase, Tyler Moore, Tommy Hammond, and Caleb Bacon. The players posed with their backs to the camera so that the last names on their jerseys formed the English phrase "Purchase More Ham and Bacon," a play on words that sounds like "Purchase More Ham and Bacon." The invention of the Philly cheesesteak is credited to brothers Pat and Harry Olivieri in the early 1930s. It was originally a sandwich they made for themselves until they shared it with a cab driver who was a regular customer at their hot dog stand, and he suggested that they sell the sandwich instead. There is an annual 3,100-mile ultra-marathon in which runners circle a city block in Queens, New York for 5,649 laps. The record finishing time is just over 40 days. Margaret Hamilton, Known for playing Elmira Gulch and the Wicked Witch in the 1939 classic The Wizard of Oz, was only 36 years old at the time of filming, 18 years younger than Billy Burke, who played Glinda. The human voice is as unique as a fingerprint. Each person's voice is distinct and identifiable because of a combination of anatomical factors, such as the size of the vocal cords, the shape of the throat, and speech patterns, making it almost impossible to find two identical voices. An average hurricane releases a phenomenal amount of energy through cloud and rain formation, around 5.2 times 10 to the 19th power joules per day. This is about 200 times more electricity than humans produce across the entire planet. The Notre Dame fire disaster was made worse because a guard was sent to investigate, but to the wrong location, where he found no fire. The alarm system was not designed to automatically notify firefighters. If your social security number in the United States was issued before 2011, it reveals where you lived when you received your number. The first three digits correspond to a specific state. Frederick Fleet, who survived the sinking of the Titanic, World War I, and World War II, died in 1965 at the age of 77. Gorillaz was the first artist to enter the United Kingdom top 40 with the majority of sales coming from digital downloads. In 1861, Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus, giving military authorities the power to arrest and detain Union dissenters without charges or a court appearance. The world record for the longest survived elevator fall was 75 stories and occurred in 1945, when a B-25 bomber crashed into the Empire State Building. In 2023, scientists discovered that Earth's inner core is slowing down and reversing its rotation relative to the surface. The finding came from analyzing seismic waves produced by earthquakes that traveled through the planet's depths over several decades. Researchers proposed that the inner core may periodically alternate between rotating slightly faster and slightly slower than Earth's mantle. These changes are extremely small and could be part of a cycle lasting several decades, related to interactions between the inner core, the liquid outer core, and the mantle. ChatGPT outsourced work to Kenyan workers to help train its artificial intelligence by labeling harmful content, such as abuse, violence, and blood. One worker described the task as torture. When J.R.R. Tolkien tried to change the entire tone of The Hobbit to make it fit the more serious Lord of the Rings trilogy, he gave up after the third chapter because it was no longer The Hobbit without its lighthearted tone and fast pace. A Coca-Cola secretary offered to sell Coca-Cola trade secrets to Pepsi. Pepsi responded by notifying Coca-Cola, and the secretary was sentenced to 8 years in prison. The case occurred in 2006, when Joya Williams and her accomplices attempted to sell confidential documents and a sample of a product still in development for around $1.5 million. PepsiCo quickly alerted Coca-Cola, which contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation. During the investigation, undercover agents posed as interested buyers and gathered evidence that ultimately led to several arrests. A man named Christopher Thomas Knight ran out of gas in rural Maine in 1986, went into the woods, and lived there for 27 years without human contact. There is a polar bear jail in northern Manitoba, Canada, where polar bears are kept isolated until they can be relocated for the safety of the residents of the town of Churchill. Known as the Polar Bear Holding Facility, it temporarily houses bears that repeatedly approach populated areas and pose a risk. During their stay, they are given water but are normally not provided with food to prevent them from associating the facility with a reward. The bears are later released far from Churchill, and some have even been transported by helicopter to safer locations. The idea that between 30 and 50% of the population does not have internal narratives or monologues came from a study of only 5 people and has never been clinically replicated. Studies of inner speech show major differences between individuals. Some people experience words or phrases mentally very frequently, while others rely more on images, sensations, or non-verbal thoughts. In addition, the same person can alternate between these different forms of thinking depending on the activity they are performing. During breastfeeding, a baby's saliva can flow back into the mother's breast, signaling her body to adjust the immune components of the milk to meet the baby's specific needs through a mechanism known as retrograde milk flow. In 1956, Don Larson pitched the only solo perfect game and no-hitter in World Series history with just 97 pitches. Only one batter managed to reach a 3-ball count. Psilocybin resets neural networks, essentially resetting the connections in your brain while you are under the effects of psychedelic mushrooms. In 1958, Burma Shave offered a free trip to Mars for sending in 900 empty jars. A grocery store manager named Arliss French took the offer literally and collected all 900. To avoid looking bad, Burma Shave sent him, fully dressed as an astronaut, to Mars, Germany. Selena Gomez named her kidney Fred after Fred Armisen, who created and starred in her favorite show, Portlandia. Gomez received a kidney transplant from her friend Francia Reza in 2017. Lizzie Sear was a woman of the night, whose lawyer, John Cameron, argued that the female magistrate handling the case was not qualified to judge because women were not considered persons under Canadian law. In 1928, the case led to women finally being declared persons by the British Privy Council. Dr. No, not James Bond, was the first character to say shaken, not stirred, on screen. Sylvester Graham, famous for graham crackers, the original clean-eating guru and a vegetarian pioneer who rejected alcohol, lust, meat, and even white bread, died at the age of 57 from complications of an opium enema. Salvador Dalí claimed to remember being in his mother's womb. He described it as floating in calm, warmth, and safety. Many believe his claims should be taken as a metaphor consistent with his eccentric image and fascination with surrealism. Spider-Man 2, Enter Electro, was scheduled to be released on September 18, 2001. Because of several references to September 11th, such as the final stage of the game taking place on top of the World Trade Center, it had to be completely redone. The Tiffany problem occurs when a historical or realistic fact is considered anachronistic or unrealistic because of modern associations. It is named after Tiffany, which is often considered a modern name but actually has medieval origins. Preferred background music helps with concentration. Listening to music you enjoy increases focus on the task and reduces mental distraction. This effect can vary depending on the person and the type of activity, but some studies have found improvements in attention when participants listen to music of their choice. Familiar songs can also make certain repetitive tasks feel less monotonous. However, when an activity requires processing words or memorizing information, music with lyrics can compete for attention, so instrumental music tends to interfere less. Elephant duels once existed in Southeast Asia. Leaders of opposing armies of equal rank would face each other on the battlefield in hand-to-hand combat while riding elephants. It was seen as honorable and heroic because it prevented troop losses. The practice died out when the Portuguese introduced firearms in the 16th century. Unlike dogs, wolves, jackals, and coyotes, foxes cannot interbreed with other canids. Foxes belong to different evolutionary branches and have significant genetic differences from canids of the genus Canis. For example, the red fox has 34 chromosomes, while dogs, wolves, and coyotes have 78. Although they all belong to the Canidae family and share a distant ancestor, their lineages separated millions of years ago. There are also no scientifically confirmed hybrids between foxes and domestic dogs. There are more museums in the United States than McDonald's and Starbucks locations combined, 35,000 compared with 14,000 and 16,000 respectively. The museum figure includes an enormous variety of institutions, from major national museums to small historical centers, specialized museums, zoos, and botanical gardens. Many are operated by communities, universities, or nonprofit organizations. The United States even has museums dedicated to extremely specific subjects, such as food, toys, tools, transportation, and events in local history. Napoleon shipped more than 800,000 pints of wine during his Egyptian campaign. The French expedition to Egypt began in 1798 and mobilized tens of thousands of soldiers, as well as sailors, scientists, engineers, and artists. Transporting supplies during such a massive operation was an enormous logistical challenge, especially because of the climate and the long supply routes. Wine was a common part of French military rations and could be more practical than relying exclusively on local water sources, whose quality varied. The pizza effect is the phenomenon in which the culture of a nation or people is transformed somewhere else and then re-exported back to its culture of origin. The term was popularized by anthropologist Aghehananda Bharati in 1970 to describe how certain ideas or traditions can acquire new characteristics abroad and later return with greater prestige or popularity. The name refers to pizza, a food with Italian roots that evolved significantly in the United States before some of those variations later influenced Italy's food culture. Nick Mason, the drummer for Pink Floyd, competed in the 24 Hours of Le Mans endurance race 5 times and completed it twice. Between 1873 and 1880, the idea of transfusing milk into the body as a substitute for blood in cases of emergency bleeding was tested throughout the United States. The results, sometimes successful, were published in medical journals, but over time the practice was considered too risky and was discontinued. In 1900, a doctor named Jesse William Lazier wanted to prove that yellow fever was transmitted by mosquitoes. He allowed an infected mosquito to bite him and contracted yellow fever, proving that the hypothesis was correct. He then died 17 days later. The original color of blue tack was actually white, but after concerns that children might mistake it for chewing gum, blue coloring was added. The reusable adhesive appeared in the 1960s as an unexpected result of attempts to develop a new sealant. It was soon discovered that the material was especially useful for attaching posters and papers without the need for nails or tape. Over time, it became a common product in schools, offices, and homes, and its distinctive blue color eventually became part of its identity. Brady Feigl and Brady Feigl are two minor league baseball players who are not related but share the same name and physical characteristics. Both are 6 feet 4 inches tall, have red hair, thick red beards, heavy glasses, and 53% Germanic ancestry. The Federal Railroad Administration allows you to report when and where trains have blocked a crossing for unreasonable periods of time. There are no longer any significant barriers to a form of human cloning. In 2018, Chinese scientists successfully cloned 2 crab-eating macaques named Zhongzhong and Huahua, the first primates to be successfully cloned. You can reduce the levels of forever chemicals, or PFAS, in your blood through blood plasma donations. A study involving Australian firefighters found that regular plasma donations significantly reduced blood concentrations of certain PFAS, compounds known to remain in the body for years. Whole blood donations also produced a reduction, although a smaller one. PFAS have been used for decades in products resistant to water, stains, and heat, and can be found in numerous everyday items. British Airways has a Flying with Confidence course that aims to help people overcome their fear of flying. It actually has a 98% success rate. Swiss cars need a sticker with the letters CH when driving abroad, as required by the Vienna Convention on Road Traffic of 1968. Swiss license plates do not have a country code, only the Swiss and cantonal coats of arms and the cantonal code. A large study led by Dr. Danielle Dick and 26 researchers analyzed the genes of 1.5 million people and found 579 locations in the genome linked to antisocial behavior, drug use, and addiction. It is known as a high-risk profile. However, fighter pilots, chief executive officers, and entrepreneurs also have it. Studies show that experiencing déjà vu is more likely among people with more education, travel experience, and liberal attitudes. It also decreases considerably as a person gets older. The phenomenon appears to be especially common among teenagers and young adults, and many people report experiencing it at least once. Déjà vu usually lasts only a few seconds and appears suddenly, producing an intense feeling of familiarity with a situation that we know is new. It has also been observed that it may occur more frequently during periods of fatigue or stress. Michael Kearney, who spoke his first word at 4 months old, completed his bachelor's degree in anthropology in 2 years to become the youngest college graduate in history at just 10 years old. The loudness war began in the 1980s and peaked in the early 2000s. Music producers and broadcasters increased the audio levels of albums and radio stations. As a result of consumer complaints, United States regulators passed the Calm Act, which mandated maximum sound levels in broadcasts. Humans actually have a form of echolocation. Simply by clicking their tongues or snapping their fingers, they can tell where they are or where to go. Around 30% of blind people use this with their canes. Even people who are not blind can learn to do this with enough patience and training. The average human grows about 590 miles of hair over a lifetime. Although each individual hair grows approximately 0.4 of an inch per month, the human scalp contains around 100,000 hair follicles that produce hair simultaneously. Each follicle goes through independent cycles of growth, rest, and shedding, So we normally lose between 50 and 100 hairs a day without going bald. In addition, hair on different parts of the body has different growth cycles, which determine the maximum length it can reach. A treasure known as the Schroeder treasure was discovered in 1985 while the foundations for a telephone booth were being built. The government confiscated 3,000 coins. Years later, a larger discovery was made. However, this time, most of the find was taken before the authorities arrived. A criminal investigation was launched. Otis Redding's iconic song, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, was recorded just days before he died in a plane crash and became the first posthumous #1 single in the United States. In the United States, people weigh less shortly before Thanksgiving. Studies that have tracked weight fluctuations throughout the year have found that weight typically begins to increase during the holiday season, especially between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. Part of that gain may remain for several months, although many people gradually lose a fraction of it during the spring and summer. As a result, body weight can follow a small seasonal cycle that repeats year after year. Betamax had higher quality images than VHS when recorded at the base B1 speed. However, this speed was rarely offered on Betamax videocassette recorders after 1979 because its recording time on a standard Betamax tape was only 1 hour. So its picture quality advantage over VHS was essentially eliminated for most of the format war. Richmond Bridge in London was financed through a tontine, with the tolls collected for crossing the bridge shared among the investors, each receiving a larger share as the others died. The bridge became free to cross after the death of the last survivor. The medieval polymath Saint Hildegard of Bingen created her own language from scratch with an entirely new alphabet and vocabulary, based mainly on Latin and Middle High German. It is one of the oldest constructed languages still known to exist, and its purpose remains largely unknown. Penguins defecate approximately every 8 minutes. This frequency is related to their abundant food intake and a digestive system adapted to quickly process large amounts of fish, krill, and squid. In some colonies, the enormous concentration of birds can cover extensive areas with guano. These deposits are so abundant that they can be seen in satellite images and have helped scientists locate previously unknown penguin colonies. In addition, guano provides nutrients to the soil and nearby ocean, especially nitrogen and phosphorus. Researchers can also analyze it to obtain information about the colony's diets and study how their populations have changed over time. During the 19th century, the ampersand symbol was taught as the 27th letter of the alphabet. The alphabet ended with X, Y, Z, and per se and, but over time, this phrase gradually blended together in English until it became the word ampersand. Kellogg's co-founder, John Kellogg, ran a sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, where his cereals were part of the patient's diet. Future competitor C.W. Post was actually a patient there in 1891, settled in the same city, began selling his own imitation of Kellogg's cereals, and even opened his own sanitarium in 1892. China began developing nuclear weapons and nuclear submarines before it had the infrastructure to extract uranium. Its nuclear program gained momentum during the 1950s, when the country was still building much of the industry and scientific capacity needed to support it. In its early stages, China received technical assistance from the Soviet Union, although that cooperation later ended. China conducted its first nuclear test in 1964 and launched its first nuclear-powered submarine during the following decade, becoming one of the few nations capable of developing both technologies. The DVD began as two competing formats from Sony and Philips and Toshiba and Time Warner. The two eventually merged into a single project after IBM, Microsoft, Apple, Compaq, and Hewlett-Packard said they would boycott both unless they did so. The Japanese war criminal Hitoshi Imamura believed that his 10-year prison sentence was too lenient, so he built a replica of the prison in his garden, where he remained until his death. There was a teenager whose diet consisted of French fries, Pringles, white bread, and an occasional slice of ham or sausage. He was found to have severe vitamin deficiencies and damage from malnutrition, and he had developed blind spots in the center of his vision. He now has permanent vision loss. The Great British Dog and Cat Massacre of 1939 occurred when London residents, preparing for war with Germany, voluntarily euthanized more than 400,000 of their household pets in a single month to ease pressure on resources. 400-meter world record holder Wade Van Niekerk is the only sprinter in history to have run under 10, 20, 31, and 44 seconds in the 100, 200, 300, and 400 meters, respectively. In 2012, a California high school student was sent to urinate in a bucket inside a storage closet after a teacher mistakenly believed that bathroom breaks were not allowed. In 2017, a court ordered the school district to pay the student $1.25 million. During the filming of Dazed and Confused, Mila Jovovich, who was 15 years old at the time, married her on-screen boyfriend, Sean Andrews, who was 21. Jovovich's mother had the marriage annulled 2 months later. Halloween began about 2,000 years ago, with an ancient Celtic festival celebrating the end of the harvest season. The Gaels believed that on October 31st, the boundaries between the world of the living and the world of the dead became somewhat blurred, and the dead could return to life and wreak havoc among the living. Because the V-2 rocket ran on drinkable alcohol during its development, technicians often drank the fuel, causing significant delays. Bess Meyerson became the first Jewish Miss America in 1945. Reactions to her victory were mixed. While Jewish people hailed her as a heroine and compared her to Queen Esther, 3 of Miss America's 5 sponsors refused to have her represent them. She later became a politician. At the height of its expansion, the British East India Company became one of the most powerful commercial organizations in history. By the early 19th century, it controlled vast territories and exercised enormous economic and political influence. Some estimates claim that it accounted for nearly half of all global trade. Herman Davis was a World War I soldier famous for his extraordinary marksmanship. Using only his Springfield rifle and open sights, he took out 5 enemy soldiers from 1,000 yards away. He humbly described it as just a good shooting distance. Taiwan has one of the highest oral cancer rates in the world. The main cause is a culturally consumed nut called betel nut. Betel nuts are carcinogenic and produce a stimulating effect when chewed. Consumed mainly by manual laborers and indigenous Taiwanese people, the practice remains legal but is not recommended. The de facto primary language among Singaporeans is Singapore English, especially in its colloquial form, known as Singlish. In Japan, you can visit Soinea, a shop specializing in sleeping companionship. It is a cafe where you can literally pay to sleep or cuddle with the girl of your choice. A blind teenager was able to play quarterback for a California high school football team by memorizing every play, and through communication from his father on the sidelines, who described what was happening using a radio transmitter. Ronald McIntosh was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for escaping from jail, stealing a helicopter, and landing it in the exercise yard of another prison to pick up his convicted girlfriend, Samantha Lopez. They were caught 10 days later by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A French occultist built a device to test the hypothesis that snails create a permanent telepathic bond when they mate. George Brummel revolutionized British men's fashion during the Regency era and was known for taking 5 hours to get dressed each day, including polishing his boots with champagne. Boston Dynamics was acquired by Hyundai Motor Group in 2020. In 2022, the company signed a pledge stating that it would not weaponize any of its robots. The national anthem of the Netherlands is the oldest national anthem in the world and dates back to the late 1560s. Known as Wilhelmus, it consists of 15 verses and is written from the perspective of William of Orange, a key figure in Dutch independence. The first letters of its 15 verses form an acrostic spelling out the name Willem van Nassau. Although the song is more than 4 centuries old, it was not officially adopted as the national anthem of the Netherlands until 1932. Only members of the genus Homo can touch the tip of the thumb to the tip of the little finger. This ability is related to the great mobility of the human thumb and to a feature known as ulnar opposition, which allows the thumb to move across the palm to reach the other fingers. The anatomy of our hand also combines relatively short fingers with a long, strong, and flexible thumb. These characteristics allow especially fine precision grips, which are essential for manipulating small objects and using tools with great control. There are tanker ships more than 656 feet long that are built and operated solely to transport orange juice. These vessels have enormous refrigerated tanks designed to keep the product at very low temperatures during long ocean voyages. Brazil, one of the world's largest producers and exporters of orange juice, uses this system to transport large quantities to markets in Europe and other continents. Some ships can carry tens of millions of liters in a single voyage, reducing the need to use thousands of individual containers. A blue moon occurs approximately once every 2.7172 years. The name does not mean that the moon actually turns blue, but usually refers to the second full moon occurring within the same calendar month. This is possible because the cycle between two full moons lasts approximately 29 and a half days, while most months are longer. There is also a seasonal definition, the third full moon in a season that unusually contains 4 full moons. President Benjamin Harrison became a widower while in office in 1892. 4 years later, he married Mary Dimmock, the niece of his late wife, and had a daughter with her. His 2 adult children, who were around 40 years old and were also Mary's cousins, disapproved of the marriage and did not attend the wedding. The Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, were together for only 7 years and 7 months. The classic lineup was completed when Ringo Starr joined the group in August 1962, replacing drummer Pete Best. Their final recording session together as a quartet took place in August 1969, during the final stages of Abbey Road. In that short period, they recorded some of the most influential albums in popular music, toured internationally, and went from playing small clubs to becoming a worldwide phenomenon. Queen Victoria was the shortest of all British monarchs, standing only about 5 feet tall. She ascended to the throne at just 18 years old and reigned for more than 6 decades, from 1837 to 1901. Despite her small stature, her name eventually came to define an entire era of enormous political, industrial, and cultural change. Victoria had 9 children with Prince Albert, and the marriages of their descendants into various royal families earned her the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. The CIA once had to bribe the president of Egypt to join a Middle Eastern defense organization, but he accepted the bribe, which was $3 million, and then refused to join. Nikola Tesla initially hoped to live to the age of 150, but later changed this estimate to 135 after giving up alcohol because of prohibition. He regularly subjected his body to high voltages in an effort to promote longevity. Glow sticks were found to violate multiple consumer protection laws in 2014. The use of dibutyl phthalate in glow sticks considered toys is a violation of the law, and in 7 out of 9 cases, the chemical ingredients did not match what had been reported. The actor who played the master and the actress who played the wife in the movie Hocus Pocus were siblings in real life. When bowler Peter Weber famously exclaimed, "Who do you think you are? I am," after winning the 2012 United States Open on ESPN, what he meant was, "Who do you think you are to root against me? I am the man in this tournament." He directed it at a young heckler who was taunting him during his shot. There is a Catholic saint named Lucifer. Lucifer of Cagliari is venerated as a saint on the island of Sardinia. The name Lucifer and the associated verse in Isaiah would not become associated with the devil or Satan until relatively late in early Christianity. Pantone's infamous ugliest color was renamed from olive green in Australia after actual olive growers took offense. The shade, known as Pantone 448C, was chosen after research aimed at finding an especially unattractive color to use on cigarette packages. It was initially described as olive green, but the Australian olive industry protested because it believed the name harmed the image of its products. Eventually, authorities began referring to the shade simply as dark brown. In Japan, you can hire someone to apologize on your behalf. There are agencies that provide professional representatives to apologize to another person when the client does not want to or cannot do so personally. The service can be performed by phone, email, or face-to-face, and some companies even prepare the representative to adapt to specific situations. This type of service is part of a broader Japanese people rental industry, in which companions can also be hired for certain social situations. The loudest scream ever recorded came from an elementary school teacher who shouted, "Silence!" It was recorded at 121.7 decibels, and the record has stood for 30 years. The person behind the record was Jill Drake, a British teaching assistant who achieved the mark during an event held in London in the year 2000. Her scream reached a sound level comparable to that of some extremely loud concerts. The measurement was recorded by Guinness World Records and turned a word normally used to ask for quiet into one of the most famous recorded human screams. In 2014, a 5-year-old boy discovered a critical vulnerability in Xbox Live and other digital services. Christopher von Hassel discovered that he could access his father's Xbox account by entering an incorrect password and then filling the verification field with spaces. His family reported the flaw to Microsoft, which fixed the vulnerability and recognized the young researcher in its security program. Christopher had previously found ways to bypass other household controls, including a mobile phone screen lock. The incorrect use of an apostrophe in English for a plural noun is called a greengrocer's apostrophe. The term arose because of how frequently this mistake traditionally appeared on handwritten signs in British shops and markets. The 428 Cobra jet, one of Ford's most legendary high-performance engines, was created by accident. It all began with a careless mechanic, a broken engine, and a resourceful shop owner. The resulting combination of components created such a beast that Ford itself decided to put it into production. Buttergate was a controversy in 2021 caused by Canadian dairy farmers adding palm oil to cows' diets, resulting in butter that would not spread at room temperature. Letting your dog sniff during walks is like giving it a mental workout, helping it relax and absorb information about its surroundings. Smell is one of the main senses dogs use to interpret the world, and they have hundreds of millions of olfactory receptors. By stopping to investigate a tree, sidewalk, or post, they can detect traces left by other animals and pick up information that goes completely unnoticed by us. Sniff-focused walks also provide mental stimulation and allow the dog to explore at its own pace. Artie is the fossilized skeletal remains of a female human-like anthropoid discovered in 1994. She is more than 1 million years older than the famous Lucy and is more complete. Her discovery surprised scientists and disproved many fundamental theories about human evolution. Mary Surratt was the first woman to be executed by the United States federal government after being convicted for her alleged involvement in the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. A group of American sugar plantation owners, with the support of the United States government, overthrew Hawaii's last queen, Queen Liliuokalani, to make Hawaii an American protectorate. Hawaii would later be annexed. The birds we call penguins today are not actually penguins at all, but another type of bird that was given the name because of its appearance. And there are no true penguins alive today. The name was originally used for the great auk, a flightless seabird of the North Atlantic that became extinct in the 19th century. When European explorers encountered birds with a similar appearance and behavior in the southern hemisphere, they began calling them penguins as well. However, the two groups were not closely related. They independently evolved bodies adapted for diving. Avril Lavigne twice won the Most Valuable Player award in a boys' youth hockey league. She grew up in the small Canadian town of Napanee, Ontario, where she played the sport from a very young age and eventually played right wing. Hockey was an important part of her childhood, long before she became internationally famous as a singer. Lavigne also excelled at other sports and outdoor activities, and she has said that during those years, she even imagined a future connected to hockey before focusing entirely on music. The Suez Canal in Egypt was closed for 8 years, from 1967 to 1975, because of the Six-Day War, costing billions of dollars in trade. Beverly Hills was planned as an exclusively white community, with legal agreements preventing non-white people from owning or renting property. These laws also prevented Jewish people from doing the same. Although Sweden has the lowest level of smokers in Europe, at around 9.3%, it is the only country where noticeably more women smoke than men. One distinctive feature of the country is the widespread use of snus, an oral tobacco product especially popular among men that has contributed to relatively low cigarette consumption. Sweden has also implemented tobacco restrictions, taxes, and public health campaigns for decades. In recent years, the percentage of daily smokers has continued to decline, so the exact figure may vary depending on the year and the source used. New Zealand tested anonymous testicular examinations involving booths with a glory hole-style opening through which a doctor could reach and examine the testicles. Heath Ledger refused to present at the Oscars in 2007 after he and Jake Gyllenhaal were asked to make fun of their character's romance in Brokeback Mountain. Holy water in a container can actually be topped up with ordinary water, as long as the added water does not exceed 50%. The entire container is still considered holy water. Director Michael Bay was considered to direct the movie Phone Booth, released in 2002, but was dropped from the project after, according to the story, his first question about the script was how they could get the story out of the phone booth. Chicago's last Republican mayor, Big Bill, was elected 97 years ago and maintained an open alliance with Al Capone. After his victory in 1927, Big Bill's supporters crowded onto his floating speakeasy and sank it under their weight. A single autistic father with an autistic son quit his job to run a Minecraft server that only autistic people could join, so they would have a community where they could interact socially with others without being harassed. In 2007, hunters found a 3.5-inch head from an explosive lance embedded in a bowhead whale. The lance was from a model manufactured between 1879 and 1885, allowing the animal's age to be estimated at between 115 and 130 years. In 2023, the government of Anguilla earned around 32 million United States dollars in fees from registrations of .ai domains. That amounted to more than 10% of the territory's gross domestic product. Velveeta cheese was one of the first foods to receive approval from the American Medical Association. In 1931, the association awarded Velveeta its nutritional seal of acceptance at a time when the product was promoted for its protein, mineral, and vitamin content. Velveeta had been created years earlier as a way to use small pieces of cheese that would normally be wasted during production. Its uniform texture and ability to melt easily helped it quickly become a popular product in American households. Medieval peasants generally received anywhere from 8 weeks to half a year off. At the time, the church considered frequent mandatory holidays key to preventing the working population from rebelling. In 2018, 3 illegally installed vending machines were discovered on Long Island that required digging an 8-inch hole and filling it with concrete. They sold crack pipes disguised as pens for $2 each. The machines were originally tampon dispensers that had been ripped out of restrooms. During a single Senate period from 1949 to 1955, Nebraska's Class II Senate seat was held by 6 different senators because of 2 deaths, 3 appointments, 2 special elections, and 1 resignation. North Korea has repeatedly attempted to dig tunnels beneath a demilitarized zone that would allow a surprise attack on South Korea. 4 have been found, more are believed to exist, and 3 are operated as tourist attractions by the South Korean government. After a lawyer complained that Cleveland Browns fans were throwing paper airplanes, the team's attorney replied, "Enclosed is a letter we received on November 19, 1974. I feel that you should be aware that some idiot is signing your name to stupid letters." Jed, the dog that played the villainous dog in the 1982 movie The Thing, was the same dog that played White Fang in the 1991 Disney movie. Mel Blanc's gravestone reads, "That's all, folks." The phrase made famous by the character Porky Pig at the end of Looney Tunes cartoons. Blanc, known as the Man of 1,000 Voices, provided the voices of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Tweety, Sylvester, Yosemite Sam, and numerous other characters. Five Guys actually puts extra French fries in the bottom of your bag so customers feel like they got a great deal, although this is already factored into the total price. Its founder, Jerry Morrell, says it is better for customers to feel that their serving of fries was too large. Although leather is edible, containing mostly 60 to 70% water and 30 to 35% protein, only hides that are untanned or vegetable tanned can be eaten. Hides tanned with chemicals, such as those used for shoes, wallets, and suitcases, are not edible. In some regions of Canada, there is a pre-wedding tradition known as a stag and doe, where the engaged couple organizes a party with admission tickets, games, and activities to raise money for their wedding expenses. The Beatles did not legally dissolve as a band until 1974, when John Lennon signed the final contract while vacationing at Disney World in Florida. Rolling Stones guitarist Ronnie Wood comes from a community of barge people, also known as water gypsies, and his generation was the first in his family not to be born on a boat. The movie Footloose, which is about a town where dancing is banned, was inspired by a real town, Elmore City, Oklahoma. The ban began before Oklahoma became a state, and high school students petitioned in 1980 to be allowed to dance at prom. When Welsh poet Dylan Thomas died, his widow had his body sent from New York to Wales. While they were on the way, she discovered a group of sailors unknowingly using his coffin as a card table. She decided not to say anything because she thought her husband would have liked it. The Colorado Department of Transportation regularly closes one of its major interstate highways on sunny mornings because of extreme sun glare. A study of autopsy results found that the average age at death for tattooed people was 39 years, compared with 53 years for people without tattoos. The presence of any tattoo was more significant than the content of the tattoo itself. The official nickname of the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress is Big, Ugly, Fat Fellow. There is a secret material called fog bank that is used in nuclear warheads. The material is classified, its composition is classified, its use in the weapon is classified, and the process itself is classified. The tension between Marlon Brando and director Frank Oz during the filming of the score escalated to the point that Brando refused to be on set if Oz was there, so his co-star Robert De Niro ended up directing Brando while Oz remained at a distance and privately relayed directing instructions to De Niro. Churches and other religious organizations can purchase insurance that provides coverage against certain lawsuits involving inappropriate conduct or abuse committed within the institution. Nintendo bought the rights to two 1993 adult movie parodies of the Super Mario video game series to stop their distribution indefinitely. Seth MacFarlane is one of many people who hope to be cryopreserved when they die. Vitaly Klitschko was never knocked down during his boxing career and also had a knockout percentage of 87%. One of the main causes of divorce among older couples in Japan is retired husband syndrome, described by doctors as the period when wives begin to experience stress symptoms because they must take care of their newly retired husband who has nothing to do. Hawks have vision that is approximately 8 times more precise than that of humans. They have up to 1 million photoreceptors in the retina, compared to only 200,000 in humans. This allows them to detect prey at great distances and see details with great sharpness even while flying at high speed, which makes them extremely efficient hunters. There are 4,800 species of frogs in the world, but only one makes the sound croak. It is a species known for producing the classic sound that in many languages is represented as croak, while most frogs emit very different calls that can sound like whistles, buzzing, or chirping. Each species has its own call to attract a mate or mark territory. The role of vultures in nature is so important that they evolved independently in 2 isolated regions of the planet into their current forms, despite not being related. This means that vultures from the American continent do not share a common ancestor with those from other continents, despite being almost identical. The pagoda in Japan is the oldest wooden building in the world. It was built using trees from the year 600 after Christ. Many of these structures, such as the one at Horyuji Temple, have withstood earthquakes thanks to their flexible design with a central pillar that absorbs vibrations. The wood of Japanese cypress, known for its resistance over time, also helps preserve them standing after more than 1,300 years. Mr. Potato Head toys from 1952 to 1964 did not include a body. You had to provide your own potato. The toy included only pieces such as eyes, nose, mouth, and hats that were stuck directly into a real potato. Over time, a plastic body was added because the potatoes would rot and also due to new safety regulations for children's toys. The Paris subway trains were intentionally built to run on the right side instead of the left. Additionally, the tunnels are narrower than usual. This was done to prevent them from ever becoming part of the country's traditional railway network. Cows, sheep, and goats have a hard dental pad under their upper lip instead of front teeth. This dental arrangement helps ruminants gather large amounts of grass and fibrous plants. Thanks to this, they can cut grass with their tongue and lower lip, pulling it with precision. Then, their specialized digestive system allows them to regurgitate the food and chew it again, making better use of nutrients from plants that are difficult to digest. Scorpion venom is the most expensive liquid in the world, $38 million per gallon. This is because obtaining small quantities requires extracting the venom manually from each scorpion. It is used in medical and pharmaceutical research, especially to study treatments for cancer and neurological diseases. The movie Dick Tracy from 1990 uses only 7 different colors. This color palette was chosen to evoke the style of newspaper comic strips, which had limited tones. The reason why there has not been another movie about this character is because the main actor, Warren Beatty, bought the film rights since he plans to make a sequel, and to this day it has not been made and probably never will be. Adult rats can fit through a hole as small as a quarter, or through a space less than 1 inch wide. This is how rats can infest your home without you knowing it. Their skeletons are very flexible, and they only need their head to fit through for the rest of their body to pass. In addition, their incisors grow continuously, so they gnaw on wood, plastic, and even soft metals to open new access points and move around easily. A woman named Julia Butterfly lived 738 days in a tree approximately 164 feet tall and about 1,500 years old to prevent it from being cut down. The tree, a giant redwood she named Luna, was in a forest in California threatened by logging. Her protest attracted international attention, and eventually an agreement was reached to protect the tree. Yogi Bear and other Hanna-Barbera characters had a collar or something around their neck that separated their head from their body. This was done intentionally, so animators only had to draw the head in each frame when they spoke. The Library of Congress is the largest library in the world. It has more than 162 million items, more than 838 miles of shelving, more than 38 million books and printed materials, 3.6 million recordings, 14 million photos, 5.5 million maps, 7.1 million pieces of sheet music, and 70 million manuscripts. The former president of the United States, George W. Bush, named The Very Hungry Caterpillar as his favorite childhood book, but it was published when he was 23 years old, so it does not quite add up. The children's book was written by Eric Carle and published in 1969. It became one of the best-selling illustrated books in the world. For 20 years, the tallest hotel in the world was the Ryugyong Hotel in North Korea, with 105 floors. However, during that entire period, it was empty because its construction had not yet been completed. In 1985, Lynette Woodard became the first woman to play for the Harlem Globetrotters. Since then, she has played in the WNBA and has been inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame and the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. Russians do not have a single word for blue, only two different words that mean light blue and dark blue. In Russian, the colors goluboy and sinye are distinguished and considered separate basic colors. Some linguistic studies suggest that this difference makes Russian speakers identify variations of blue more quickly. During the premiere weekend of the fourth season of the series Stranger Things, the show broke the record for the most watched time on Netflix, with a total of 287 million hours combined. Previously, this record belonged to the second season of Bridgerton, with 193 million hours. Crocodiles can hold their breath underwater for up to 2 hours if necessary. The colder the water is, the longer they can remain submerged, because a cold crocodile uses less energy and oxygen than a warm one. In addition, they can significantly slow their heart rate and redirect blood flow to vital organs, which allows them to remain motionless for long periods while stalking their prey without being detected. More chimpanzees, gorillas, and bonobos are eaten by people each year than there are in zoos around the world. In several regions of Central Africa, there is an illegal market for wild animal meat known as bushmeat. This trade represents one of the greatest threats to these species, which already face habitat loss and poaching. Swimmer Michael Phelps won 23 Olympic gold medals. That is more than 80% of all countries that have competed. On November 14, 1969, Apollo 12 was struck by lightning just 36 seconds after liftoff, and moments later, it was struck again. The second strike went through the spacecraft and disabled many of its electrical systems. One of the flight controllers remembered how to switch the spacecraft's signal conditioning equipment to auxiliary, and Apollo 12 was able to continue to successfully land on the moon. Mila Jovovich and Luc Besson created the divine language for the movie The Fifth Element. By the time the production of the film ended, the two already spoke it fluently. The language was designed with basic grammatical rules and its own vocabulary so that it would sound coherent within the science fiction story. There is a special theater in the United Kingdom called an edible cinema, where during each movie they give you gourmet dishes to eat at specific parts of the film that relate to the scenes. This is meant to create a unique experience, according to them. There was going to be a sequel to the movie Gladiator, written by Nick Cave, in which Maximus would reincarnate in Rome, in the Second World War, the Vietnam War, and the Pentagon. Unfortunately, we could not enjoy that cinematic jewel. The script was commissioned by the studio at the beginning of the 2000 decade, but the idea turned out to be too strange, and the project was ultimately never produced. The star of boxer Muhammad Ali on the Walk of Fame is on the wall, not on the pavement, because he did not want the name of Muhammad to be stepped on. In 2008 in Iran, they attempted to break the Guinness record for the largest sandwich in the world, measuring 0.93 miles. They had already completed it, but just when judges were about to take the official measurement, spectators began eating it, and within minutes, nothing was left, so the record could not be officially recognized. The hood ornament of a Rolls-Royce car is actually called the Spirit of Ecstasy. This figure was designed in the early 20th century and represents a woman leaning forward with her arms extended back like wings. Over time, it became an iconic symbol of luxury and elegance associated with the brand. When Einstein published the theory of relativity, the newspaper New York Times sent the correspondent who covered golf to interview him. At that time, many newspapers still did not have journalists specialized in science, so they assigned any available reporter. Over time, the complexity of scientific discoveries led to the creation of sections dedicated exclusively to science. In the movie Tron from 1982, the character Pac-Man can be briefly seen ready to eat yellow dots, as in the video game. This happens while a character is observing a screen full of circuits. At that time, the video game had only been released 2 years earlier. In 1965, Mattel launched the Barbie Sleepover Party set. Apparently, one of its essential items for the party was a pink scale that was permanently set at 110 pounds. The set also included a small book with tips that suggested "do not eat," which generated criticism years later for promoting unrealistic body messages. Over time, the brand has tried to diversify its models to represent different body types. Bananas produce antimatter at the rate of 1 positron every 75 minutes. This happens because they contain small amounts of the radioactive isotope potassium-40, which, when it decays, can emit positrons. Despite how striking the fact sounds, the amount is so tiny that it represents no risk. Bloodhounds are the type of dog with the most sensitive sense of smell. Their sensitivity is so great that they receive 10 times more neural information in their brain from their nose than humans receive from their eyes. There is an annual sidewalk egg frying contest on July 4th in Arizona. Contestants are given 15 minutes to fry 2 eggs using only solar energy. They can use mirrors, magnifying glasses, and aluminum to help speed up the process. Eating spaghetti in Italy with anything other than a fork is considered very bad manners. In Italian tradition, spoons are not used to roll long pasta, although in some restaurants for tourists they are offered. The correct way is to twist the spaghetti only with the fork against the plate. Emperor Julius Caesar was once captured by pirates who demanded 20 talents of silver for his release. Each talent was equivalent to 55.1 pounds. It was a unit of currency. Even so, Julius Caesar advised them to ask for 50. After the ransom was paid and he was released, a fleet pursued and captured them, recovering the treasure. When the Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia erupted in 1883, the sound it produced could be heard thousands of miles away in Australia and on the island of Rodriguez. It was the loudest sound ever recorded on the planet. The explosion generated pressure waves that circled the globe several times and caused devastating tsunamis that swept nearby coasts, while ash and gases altered the global climate for months. Scientists created a synthetic version of marijuana called dimethylheptylpyran that, when smoked, produces effects that last for 2 full days. This compound belongs to a family of synthetic cannabinoids developed in laboratories to study how these substances interact with the brain and the nervous system. Some of these molecules are much more potent and longer-lasting than natural THC. In 1998, Marvel offered Sony the film rights to almost all its characters for only $25 million, but the offer was rejected. They only bought the rights to Spider-Man for $10 million because they believed people would only be interested in a movie about this superhero. The worst deal of all time. Movie theaters were banned in Saudi Arabia for several decades starting in the 1980s. However, the ban was lifted in 2018 as part of social reforms, and since then, theaters have reopened throughout the country, marking an important change in its entertainment industry. The sun takes 220 million years to orbit the galaxy, a journey it has completed only 20 times so far. This complete trip around the center of the Milky Way is called a galactic year. During the entire history of Earth, since it formed more than 4,500,000,000 years ago, The solar system has completed only a few of these orbits. The oldest cave paintings ever found were made by women. Researchers discovered this when they compared the relative size of the fingers imprinted and realized that 3/4 of them belonged to women. The slinky was invented accidentally by Richard James. Richard was a naval engineer, and while working with tension springs in 1943, he discovered that when one of the springs fell, it kept moving. He thought it would make a great toy, and that is how the slinky toy was born. Metrophobia is the fear of poetry. Although it may seem curious, some people experience anxiety when facing poetic texts, especially when they must analyze them or read them in public. The term combines the Greek word for measure or verse with phobia, and it is often mentioned humorously among literature students. Beethoven had a technique to hear his piano after he became deaf. He discovered that if he attached a piece of metal to the piano and then bit it, the vibrations would transfer to his inner ear through his bones. This is called bone conduction. Beethoven realized he was beginning to have hearing problems at 28 years old, and by 45, he could no longer hear. Gummy candies in the shape of bears were originally called dancing bears. Hans Riegel originally created them in 1920, and they were originally made of licorice. Over time, they changed to fruity flavors and quickly became popular in Europe. The shape was inspired by trained bears that were common at fairs of the time, and their small size made them accessible even in times of scarcity. A guy named Eric Simons secretly lived in the headquarters of America Online for 2 months, eating for free, using the gym and showers, and sleeping in conference rooms while working on his own company. He had been accepted into an incubation program that was later canceled, but he decided to stay anyway. For weeks, nobody suspected anything because the building had thousands of employees. To create the interior of the Millennium Falcon in the movie Star Wars, set designers bought airplane parts from a scrapyard, divided them, and attached them together. This was much cheaper than building everything from scratch. According to a survey conducted by Pew Research in 2016 of 1,520 adults living in the 50 states and the District of Columbia, just over 1 in 4 people did not read a single book in the last 12 months. Colonel Sanders used to make surprise visits to KFC restaurants, and if he did not like the food, he would throw it on the floor and insult the employees. After selling his company, Sanders continued traveling across the United States as an ambassador for the brand. He was known for being extremely demanding about the original recipe and the quality of the chicken served in the restaurants. In ancient times, Greeks did not wear pants because they considered them ridiculous, according to texts from the era. Romans also did not wear pants because they viewed them as clothing of uncivilized people. Only barbarians wore pants. Dolphins actually have 2 stomachs, one to store food and the other to digest it. This system allows them to swallow their prey quickly without chewing and process it later more efficiently, something useful in the open ocean where they may need to capture several fish in a short time before they escape. A tablet with a full memory weighs a fraction of a billionth more than a new one. This happens because storing information involves organizing electrons inside the memory circuits. Although the increase in mass is extremely small and impossible to notice in everyday life, it demonstrates that physical information also has a measurable weight. Charles Darwin predicted the existence of a type of moth in Madagascar 45 years before it was first seen, and 150 years before it was studied and published scientifically. The Goliath frog is the largest frog in the world. It can reach up to 12.5 inches in length and weigh 7.2 pounds. It lives in fast-flowing rivers in western and central Africa, and it is known for its strength, as it can move stones to create shelters where it lays its eggs. If a vampire fed once a day and turned their victims into vampires who also fed once a day, the entire world population would become vampires in just 1 month. This happens because the number of vampires would double every day, creating extremely rapid exponential growth. At that rate, within a few weeks the number would even exceed the current world population. A fish trap was discovered with the help of a satellite image from Google Earth that had been used for fishing more than 1,000 years ago along the coasts of Great Britain. The personal finance website Finder.com has launched a programmable handbag designed to help you monitor and curb your impulsive spending. Using GPS tracking, it can be programmed to lock if you enter your pre-programmed danger zones. In fact, it will vibrate and flash lights to indicate how many times you have taken out your wallet. Oh, and it will actually turn on yellow lights and vibrate every 2 hours to remind you to put on sunscreen. All of this for the modest sum of $5,000. The animal rights group PETA claims that cows can suffer humiliation if people laugh at them. The organization has argued that social animals can perceive negative human reactions as signals of threat or stress. Although the concept of humiliation is scientifically debated, there is evidence that human treatment influences the well-being of cattle. There is a hammer museum in Haines, Alaska, where there are more than 1,400 different hammers and other tools that were made from prehistoric times to modern industrial-era pieces. In 2013, Navy veteran Lonnie Bedwell became the first completely blind kayaker to paddle the entire length of the Grand Canyon, 364 miles, in a solo kayak. It took him 16 days. Every 3 seconds, the sun emits more neutrinos than the number of atoms in all the humans who have lived in all of history. These neutrinos are produced during nuclear reactions in the core of the sun and pass through matter almost without interacting with it. Billions pass through the body of every person each second without us noticing. In the movie Black Swan, when the main character had to perform complex dance steps, they were filmed with a professional dancer, and in post-production, Natalie Portman's head was added. The effect turned out so well that it is very difficult to distinguish when it is her entirely or only her head attached. In Fairbanks, Alaska, the northern lights can be seen an average of 240 nights per year. On those nights, the sky lights up with colors ranging from yellows and greens to reds, purples, and blues. This phenomenon occurs when particles from the solar wind interact with the Earth's atmosphere, and the region has become one of the most popular destinations in the world to observe this natural spectacle. Emma Watson said that filming the long-awaited scene where she kisses Rupert Grint in Harry Potter was a horrible experience because they consider each other like siblings. Friend zone. Both actors grew up together for more than a decade filming the saga, so they described the scene as uncomfortable and strange, even though fans had been waiting for it for years. In 2017, singer Shakira was determined to quit music after becoming a mother for the second time, but her partner at the time, soccer player Gerard Piqué, convinced her not to retire. In 2021, the singer sold the rights to her 145 songs in a multi-million-dollar deal. The first garbage disposal was invented by architect John W. Hammis in 1927. He wanted to make kitchen cleanup easier for his wife. What a great guy. His invention led to the creation of the company Incinerator, which began marketing the product years later, and over time it became a common appliance in many modern kitchens. There are 5 categories of hurricanes. The slowest has the same wind speed as the maximum speed of a cheetah, while the fastest beats the most powerful roller coaster in the world with approximately 149 miles per hour. This classification is known as the Saffir-Simpson scale and measures the intensity of hurricanes according to the sustained speed of their winds and the potential damage they can cause. Using a paper towel to dry your hands after washing them reduces bacteria by 40%, while using an air dryer increases bacteria by 220%. This is because bacteria grow faster in warm and humid environments. There is a beaver dam located in Wood Buffalo National Park in northern Alberta, Canada, that is so large it can be seen from outer space. It stretches for 2,789 feet. This structure has been built and expanded by generations of beavers over decades, forming a complex system of channels and ponds that modifies the landscape in an impressive way. Adidas cancels any kind of sponsorship with athletes if they find out they have anything to do with the Church of Scientology. The company has had strict internal policies regarding associations that could affect its public image. In some cases, it has been reported that the brand avoids collaborating with figures linked to controversial organizations in order to protect its global reputation. Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom, who recently completed 70 years of reign, never gave a press conference, never voted in an election, or expressed a personal opinion publicly. This is a royal tradition, but she could break it if she wanted. Dinosaur fossils have been found on all of the world's main continents. They have been discovered in Antarctica, Australia, and India, and in the far north of Canada. This is because millions of years ago, the continents were joined in the supercontinent Pangaea, which allowed dinosaurs to spread before the landmasses separated. The word school comes from ancient Greek and means free time. I think the meaning got lost over the years. It comes from the Greek word skole, which originally referred to time dedicated to rest, conversation, and reflection. Over time, that period of leisure became associated with study and philosophy, especially in the academies of ancient Greece. On the Golden Gate Bridge, there is a truck that can add a lane to the flow of traffic in whichever direction it is needed. It is called a zipper system because it resembles a clothing zipper. The first Sony Walkman models had two different headphone jacks. This was done so you could share your music with other people. However, it was discontinued in later models. The little brown bat can consume up to 1,000 mosquitoes in an hour. This voracious appetite makes it a natural ally against pests, since in a single night, it can ingest a large number of flying insects, helping reduce mosquito populations in its environment without the need for pesticides. A female ferret can die if it goes a year without mating. This happens because females enter a prolonged heat and remain in that state until reproduction occurs. If the heat lasts too long, high hormone levels can cause severe anemia, which is why in captivity it is controlled through sterilization or breeding. For centuries, the gemstone amethyst was considered among the most valuable minerals on the planet, alongside diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. But in the 18th century, a very large quantity of this mineral was found in Brazil, which immediately lowered its value. The hagfish has no jaws or bones in its body, and it is capable of tying itself into a knot. It also produces a slimy substance that can expand upon contact with water, which it uses to defend itself from predators by clogging their gills. Despite its primitive appearance, it has a rudimentary skull and keratin teeth that it uses to scrape flesh from dead animals on the ocean floor. Graphene, the strongest material in the world, is 1 million times thinner than paper, but 200 times stronger than iron. It is made of a single layer of carbon atoms arranged in a hexagonal structure. Since its discovery in 2004, it has been studied for applications in electronics, batteries, flexible screens, and ultralight materials. Some cultures believed that vampires had arithmomania, the compulsive need to count things. So if one chased you, you could throw rice at it, and it would have to stop and count each grain one by one, which is why Count Von Count from Sesame Street teaches mathematics. The largest meteorite and the largest piece of iron ever found is the Hoba meteorite. It was discovered in 1920 in Namibia by a farmer who was plowing his field. The meteorite weighs 66 tons and measures 8.9 feet long, 8.9 feet wide, and about 3 feet thick. Experts estimate that it fell to Earth about 80,000 years ago. Just like humans, British cows make moo sounds with different accents depending on their region. Some researchers and farmers have observed that the sound can vary slightly depending on the environment and the group of animals they grow up with. It is a curious example of how even animals can develop regional vocal variations. The Japanese baseball team Hanshin Tigers did not win a championship for more than 18 years, and many people believed this was due to a curse from a statue of Colonel Sanders from the KFC restaurant. During the team's last championship, fans removed one of these statues and threw it into a river. Years later, authorities recovered the statue. From 1956 to 1958, Chrysler offered a record player in its new cars called Highway Hi-Fi, but it did not last long because they had a tendency to break. Almost half of all babies in China are born by cesarean section. In some cities, the proportion has been even higher during certain years. Among the reasons mentioned are preventive medical decisions, preferences of some hospitals, and the possibility of scheduling the birth date, something sometimes related to cultural beliefs about lucky dates. Soldiers usually break their coordinated marching while crossing a bridge. This is because in 1831, British soldiers were marching and the amplified vibrations caused the bridge they were crossing to collapse. India has 23 official languages. Although Hindi is the official language of the central government in India, with English as a provisional subsidiary official language, individual state legislatures are free to adopt any regional language as the official language of that state. In the 19th century, sausages were sold under the name mystery bags. Today they are still that, but now with another name. The nickname came from the fact that people often did not know exactly which parts of the animal were used to make them. Even so, sausages became one of the most popular street foods in Europe and America. A parking meter officer in New York was arrested for stealing coins. He took between $190 and $600 each week for a total of $90,000 over 6 years. Bank employees suspected him because he always deposited too many coins into his account while still wearing his uniform. That was not very smart. From the 16th century to the 1960s, Egyptian mummies were ground up and used to produce a brown paint color called mummy brown. The powder was mixed with white resin and myrrh to produce a deep brown pigment. It takes 1.5 hours to make a boiled ostrich egg, in case you ever want to cook one. An ostrich egg can weigh around approximately 3.3 pounds and is roughly equivalent to 2 dozen chicken eggs. Because of its size and its extremely thick shell, it requires much more cooking time. In addition, its shell is so hard that many times a small drill or similar tools are needed to open it without breaking it unevenly. In the first quarter of 2019, Facebook deleted about 2 billion fake accounts from the social network, more than double the average number of accounts they normally deleted each month, and they did not specify the reason for this action. During World War II, Germany used weapons that had a curved barrel device attached to the end of an MP-44 rifle, allowing soldiers to fire over obstacles without exposing themselves to return fire. There is a chili pepper grown in Japan called shishito, where 1 out of every 10 is very spicy, and there is no way to know which one. Most of these peppers are mild and slightly sweet, but occasionally one develops a much higher level of heat. Because of that, eating them often becomes a kind of culinary roulette. There was an internet myth that said it is dangerous to throw rice at weddings, as tradition dictates, because doves could eat it, swell up, and explode. However, it has been proven that this is false and does not pose any danger to these birds. Sea scallops have about 60 eyes. They can be a bright blue color and help the scallop detect light, darkness, and movement. These small eyes are lined along the edge of their shell and function like tiny mirrors that reflect light to form images. Thanks to this, they can react quickly to predators by swimming with rapid opening and closing movements of their shells. There is an electric bell at the University of Oxford in England that has been ringing continuously since 1840, powered by a battery that has never run out. They say it will eventually stop ringing, and when it does, they will dismantle the battery to see what it is made of. Makoto Igarashi from Tokyo developed the Hizamakura lap pillow, which is a cushion shaped like a woman's legs wearing a miniskirt, on which you can rest your head to experience maternal comfort. The actress Stephanie Beatriz caused her characteristic eyebrow scar when she tripped over a Lego when she was 10 years old. The fall caused a cut that left the permanent mark that today is part of her appearance. Beatriz is known for portraying Rosa Diaz in the series Brooklyn Nine-Nine. In 1974, Gerber Baby Products attempted to market Gerber Singles, which were jarred meals such as creamed beef and beef burgundy. The marketing was aimed at college students and young adults, but believe it or not, the product failed. Great white sharks can avoid passing through an area for more than 1 year if they saw an orca nearby. Since it is their only natural predator, they fear it and may leave even if it is their favorite hunting location, even if the orca was only passing through. The eye color of reindeer changes depending on the season. During the summer, their eyes are golden, while in winter, they change to a dark blue color. This helps scatter reflected light and allows them to better adapt to snowy terrain. A 68-year-old grandmother from Western Wales was followed by and surrounded for 2 days by 20,000 bees. They were actually trying to rescue their queen bee, which, without her knowing, had gotten into her Mitsubishi Outlander. Beekeepers were called to safely remove them. In 1999, a 4-year-old girl turned yellow after drinking too much orange soda. The case was reported by doctors who explained that excess drinks with colorings and beta-carotene can cause a condition called carotenemia. This makes the skin acquire a yellowish or orange tone, although it is generally not dangerous and disappears after changing the diet. When the influenza epidemic of 1899 occurred, many people began blaming telegraph wires because they noticed affected cities were connected by them and thought the virus could travel through them, which was obviously not true. Currently, about 10% of the entire population of Pingalap Island in Micronesia has total color blindness. This condition was traced back to an ancestor who was one of the 20 people who survived a typhoon that struck the island in 1775. During the Vietnam War, United States fighter jets dropped their external fuel tanks over Vietnam when they were empty or if the pilot needed more maneuverability. Vietnamese farmers then reused them and used them as canoes. It is believed that there are 100,000 mountains under the sea. Only around 1,000 have been recorded. These formations are known as seamounts, and many rise thousands of meters from the ocean floor. Some even form islands when their summit emerges above the surface of the water. Actress Megan Fox suffers from papyrophobia, which is the fear of dry paper. She herself has mentioned in interviews that she avoids touching sheets of paper when they are completely dry, and usually moistens her fingers to turn pages. This type of specific phobia may seem unusual, but it is part of a wide variety of uncommon fears documented in psychology. Dogs have many nerve endings in their ears, so when they are touched, they release endorphins, which relax them and make them feel very good. Corn needs to be cooked with lime so the body can properly absorb its nutrients. This is something native people of the American continent knew long ago. However, the Europeans who arrived did not know this, which caused many deaths from poor nutrition during the early years of colonization in different regions. Baby hedgehogs are born with quills, but they are soft and flexible. At birth, these quills are covered by a layer of swollen skin that protects the mother during delivery. In the following hours, that layer reduces and the quills begin to harden gradually. Over time, they develop a second, firmer layer, which allows them to better defend themselves as they grow. A statue of Jesus in Ohio, United States, was destroyed in 2010 when it was struck by lightning that caused it to catch fire and collapse. The sculpture was made mainly of flammable materials over a metal structure, which allowed the fire to spread quickly. The event was widely discussed in the media and on social networks. When the original Incredible Hulk series was very successful, Marvel executives believed that someone would eventually create a similar series with a female protagonist. So they asked Stan Lee to create such a character so no one else could do it first and claim ownership. This is how She-Hulk was created. There is a bar in New York that operates like the stock market every night. The price of drinks rises or falls according to their supply and demand. When many people order the same drink, its price increases. And when almost nobody buys it, the price drops, imitating the behavior of the stock market. The only countries that use Fahrenheit as the unit of temperature measurement are Belize, the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, Palau, and the United States. In all other countries, Celsius is used. In the early days of the Indianapolis 500, most cars had two seats, one for the driver and one for the riding mechanic. The mechanic monitored gauges, made repairs, and sometimes even massaged the driver's arms and neck. The riding mechanic was mandatory from 1912 to 1922, and then again from 1930 to 1937. Rabbits live around 10 years, but they can have offspring starting at 5 months of age. Additionally, their gestation period is only 1 month, and after their babies are born, they can become pregnant again immediately. This is why these animals tend to multiply very quickly. The Philippines flies its flag upside down when it is at war. This caused great confusion and tension in 2010 when the flag was displayed inverted behind the president at that time during his meeting with President Obama and other leaders of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Everyone thought it was an act of war. Between 70,000 and 150,000 saffron flowers are needed to obtain approximately 2.2 pounds of pure saffron. Alexander the Great washed his hair with saffron to keep it shiny and orange. Each flower produces only 3 small red stigmas that must be collected by hand, which explains why this spice is one of the most expensive in the world. Apollo 13 astronaut Jim Lovell had a cameo in the movie Apollo 13. He chose to play the captain of the ship that originally rescued him, since that was the rank he held when he retired from the naval forces to become an astronaut. In Japan, there is a National Tom Cruise Day on October 10th. It has been celebrated since 2006 and was established by the country's holiday association as gratitude for being the Hollywood actor who has visited Japan the most times. The full name of Pablo Picasso was, get ready for this, Pablo Diego José Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno Crispín Crispiniano de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso. This long name follows the Spanish tradition of including multiple given names and family surnames, many of them with religious and saint references, something common in his time and that reflected both heritage and cultural devotion. In the time of the Roman Empire, salt was worth its weight in gold, and soldiers were sometimes paid with salt. That is where the word salary comes from. Salt was an essential resource for preserving food and for trade, which is why it had great economic value. Many ancient trade routes emerged precisely to transport this mineral. If you catch a sturgeon in the United Kingdom, it automatically belongs to the royal family. This is due to a decree signed centuries ago. These fish are currently threatened by commercialization because they are the source of the most expensive variety of caviar. Actress Margaret Hamilton, who is best remembered for her terrifying portrayal of the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz and for scaring children everywhere, was actually a kindergarten teacher before becoming an actress. It takes 10 times more energy to heat water than to heat steel. This happens because water has a very high heat capacity, which means it can absorb large amounts of heat before increasing its temperature. For that reason, water is frequently used to regulate temperature in industrial systems and in the climate of the planet. In Austria, in 2006, a postage stamp was released that contained a small fragment of real meteorite dust, 0.01 ounces in each one. This was the first time something like this had been done. According to researchers from the National Hansen's Disease Programs in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the armadillo is one of the few mammals that carries the bacteria that causes leprosy. In particular, the 9-banded armadillo can naturally harbor Mycobacterium leprae, and it is believed that its low body temperature favors the survival of the bacteria. For this reason, it has also been used in scientific studies to better understand this disease over time. Leonardo da Vinci was the first person to observe the curvature of the spine. Until that moment, everyone believed it was straight. Through his anatomical studies and dissections, he drew the spine with its natural curves and described how they help maintain balance and distribute the weight of the human body. His notebooks also show vertebrae drawn with great precision, anticipating many anatomical studies by centuries. The myth of the Loch Ness Monster is older than it seems. Texts more than 1,500 years old have been found describing an aquatic beast that attacked people when they went to the lake. In 2014, a monster enthusiast declared that it had already gone extinct because there had been no reported sightings for more than a year, and blamed pollution and climate change. The Hammerschwand elevator in Switzerland is the tallest outdoor elevator in Europe. It connects a rock path with the Hammerschwand lookout on a plateau overlooking Lake Lucerne. It carries passengers 502 feet to the top in less than 1 minute. 95% of all the information in the world is still stored on paper. Most of it corresponds to administrative documents, legal archives, historical records, and printed material. Although digital storage has grown enormously in recent decades, huge amounts of information still remain physically archived in libraries, offices, and government archives. Scientists placed a type of fungus on a map of the city of Tokyo where they put food representing urban centers. After 1 day, the fungus had already spread and reached the food points, forming almost an identical copy of the city's subway system, which had been designed in the most efficient way possible. The Chinese have recorded sightings of solar eclipses since 720 before Christ. These records were kept in detailed imperial chronicles and were so precise that they are used today to compare modern astronomical calculations. In ancient China, eclipses were interpreted as celestial signs, and court astronomers had the responsibility of predicting them, since failing to do so could be considered a serious error before the emperor. Helium is a non-renewable resource. At some point, it will run out. This gas is mainly formed by the radioactive decay of elements inside the Earth, and is extracted along with natural gas. Because it is extremely light, when it is released into the atmosphere, it slowly escapes into space, which means it cannot be recovered. The number of sea turtle nests on the coasts of Florida has increased 85,000% in the last 40 years. In 1979, there were 62. But thanks to a law protecting endangered animals, by 2017, there were 53,102 nests. On the planet Jupiter, more than 90 moons have been discovered to date. This number has increased over time thanks to better telescopes and observation techniques, and it continues to grow as new small and irregular moons that orbit the gas giant are identified. There is a frog in Australia that fills itself with water like a balloon. Aboriginal people learned that if you gently squeeze one of these, you can drink its water. Ew! This species is known as the water-holding frog, and it can store liquid in its body during droughts. In desert environments, it buries itself underground and can survive long periods waiting for rain. When advertisements for the iPhone X were released, claiming that the phone could take studio-quality photos, the Advertising Regulatory Commission in the United Kingdom received many complaints that it was misleading advertising. However, they were rejected because there is no technical definition of studio-quality photos, and it is subjective. A man named Mbah Goto from Indonesia claims to be 146 years old. and there is a photo of his government identification card to prove it. The card shows his date of birth as December 31st, 1870. He has outlived his 10 siblings, 4 wives, and his children. In the first month of its life, a silkworm increases its weight 10,000 times compared to its birth weight. During that time, it consumes enormous amounts of mulberry leaves, its main food. This accelerated growth is one of the reasons why silkworm farming has been so efficient for producing thread for thousands of years. Some crabs have one claw larger than the other. This is natural in some species, but in other crabs, it happens because they previously lost a claw and it grew back but has not yet reached its full size. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on Earth. It spans more than 1,243 miles of islands and submerged reefs. It is located between the coast of Queensland and the western edge of the Pacific Ocean. The philosopher of ancient Greece, Chrysippus of Soli, died from laughing too much at a joke he invented. According to ancient accounts, he saw a donkey eating figs and ordered that wine be given to it to accompany them. The scene seemed so funny to him that he began laughing uncontrollably, and according to tradition, that laughter ended up causing his death. The reason why Lego figureheads have a hole, in addition to being useful for attaching accessories, is so air can pass through them in case a child accidentally swallows one, similar to pen caps. Only 2% of women describe themselves as beautiful. This figure comes from an international survey conducted in 2004 that explored perceptions of female beauty in different countries. The study showed that many women tend to judge themselves harshly, something that has been linked to cultural pressure and beauty standards promoted by the media. The rights to make the movie based on the novel The Wolf of Wall Street were purchased in 2007 by Warner and Leonardo DiCaprio. They won the negotiations over Paramount Pictures and Brad Pitt, who were also interested in making the movie. There are numbers on the light posts in Central Park in New York City to help people navigate if they get lost. The first 2 or 3 numbers indicate the nearest cross street, and the last number indicates which side of the city you are closer to. If it is an odd number, it means you are on the west side, and if you have an even number, it means you are on the east. If a black hole with the same mass as the Sun formed in its place, Earth and the other planets in the solar system would not be absorbed. They would continue in the same orbit. The black hole would have to be larger to destroy Earth. The black and white patterns on the underside of a humpback whale are distinctive for each whale. The shape and color patterns on their dorsal fins and tails are like fingerprints for humans. Researchers use photographs of their tails to identify them and track their migratory routes over thousands of miles between feeding and breeding areas. Russians held so many wild parties when the Second World War ended that all the vodka in the city ran out. After the victory over Germany in 1945, there were massive celebrations in several Soviet cities. Some historical accounts mention that alcohol reserves were quickly depleted because of the scale of the celebrations. Baobab trees native to Madagascar can store up to 31,700 gallons of water in their trunks. After the annual Tomatina festival takes place in the town of Buñol in Valencia, Spain, the city streets are left completely clean thanks to the acidity of the tomatoes, which disinfects and cleans surfaces. In August 2016, 323 reindeer died from the impact of a single lightning strike in Hardangervidda National Park in Norway. They were clustered together due to a strong storm and died from the ground current that stopped all of their hearts. The gold dissolved in all the oceans of the world has an estimated value of $475 trillion. However, the metal is so dispersed that extracting it would be practically impossible with current technology. On average, there are only a few parts per billion of gold in seawater. Silver miners in the 19th century used to leave their denim pants, or jeans, in mines when they became very worn out. These jeans, which were among the first from the Levi's brand, are now sold for up to $30,000. This has led many people to explore mines just to find these pants. Bumblebees perform warm-up exercises before flying when it is very cold or during winter. This is so they do not experience cramps during flight. The Eiffel Tower was close to being demolished in 1909 because it was considered useless and many people thought it was ugly. But it was saved when it was converted into a radio antenna capable of transmitting signals to the other side of the world. The Lithuanian town of Ramigala holds an annual beauty contest where the contestants are goats. Around 500 people brave the summer heat to attend the parade in honor of the goat, a traditional symbol of the northern town. The youngest person to appear old. It was the daughter of rapper Jay-Z, Blue Ivy Carter, whose crying is recorded at the end of the song Glory, which is why she appears in the credits. In the town of Churchill, in the Manitoba region of Canada, it is illegal to lock your car in case someone needs to use it for shelter from an attack by one of the 900 polar bears that live nearby. A single zinc mine in Namibia uses 1/5 of the entire electricity demand of the country. It is the Rosh Pina mine, one of the most important mining operations in southern Africa. The extraction, crushing, and processing of the ore require enormous amounts of energy. Because of this very high consumption, mining has become one of the sectors that most influences the national electrical infrastructure. Because camels live in conditions where there is little water, their digestive systems squeeze their food until it is almost completely dry. In fact, their excrement is so dry that you can use it to start a fire. The song Woman by Peter and Gordon from 1966 was written by Paul McCartney, who used the name Bernard Webb as a pseudonym. He did this to prove that his music could succeed even without his name attached. And he was right, because the song reached number 14 on the charts. On May 31st, 2014, according to Guinness World Records, 104 volunteers at the Deer Run Camping Resort in Gardners, Pennsylvania, made the largest S-more in history. It weighed an astonishing 267 pounds. It has been proven that airplane seats that face backward are safer in case of deceleration or an accident. However, most airlines refuse to implement them. Bees can control the thickness and clarity of their honey by beating their wings together at ventilation points in their hive at different rhythms to control water evaporation. In 2013, at one of the Tokyo subway stations, a section of track was changed from surface level to underground without interrupting service for a single day. This was accomplished through perfectly planned work carried out during the 4 hours when the system normally closes at night, and by the next morning, it was already in operation. In Tanzania, child marriage has been a social concern for years. Nearly 2 out of 5 girls are married before turning 18 years old. Andy Warhol always wore green underwear. The artist had many quirks related to his appearance and his daily routine. He was also known for keeping boxes full of everyday objects that he called time capsules, where he stored everything from letters and receipts to small memories from his daily life. The eye cavities of the Moai statues on Easter Island used to have eyes made of white coral. This was discovered after researchers assembled small broken pieces of this material that they had found and originally thought served another purpose, but they did not. In August 2016, the first documented case of twin puppies was born by cesarean section at the Rue de Port Animal Hospital in Johannesburg, South Africa. Until 2003, Thomas Edison was considered the most prolific inventor of all time. However, he was surpassed by Japanese inventor Shunpei Yamazaki, whose inventions include the thin conductive layer that makes liquid crystal displays, or LCD screens, possible. According to Guinness World Records, Anthony Victor from India has the longest ear hair in history. It measures more than 7 inches at its longest point. In 2008, a woman who had been missing for 42 years was found dead while watching television. Because she had died many years earlier, her apartment remained intact as it had been at that time, like a time capsule. The case occurred in London with Joyce Vincent, and in the apartment, there were still unopened Christmas presents and the television turned on. Actor Rowan Atkinson, known for playing Mr. Bean and recently for starring in the Netflix series Man vs. Bee, is not widely known to have a master's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Oxford. There is a building near Newark, Ohio, shaped like a picnic basket. It was built by Dave Longaberger, owner of the Longaberger Basket Company, in 1997 to be used as its headquarters. To stay cool in high temperatures, kangaroos lick their arms until their fur and skin are soaked. The wind hitting their arms causes the saliva to evaporate and cool them down. The United States has had 2 presidents who were peanut farmers, Thomas Jefferson and Jimmy Carter. If planet Earth lost its ability to rotate and slowly stopped spinning, the oceans would migrate toward the poles, where stationary gravity would be stronger, creating an equatorial megacontinent like a horizontal band of land. Bees in Ribeauville, France, began producing honey in different shades of blue and green. When beekeepers investigated, they discovered that instead of collecting nectar from flowers, the bees were feeding on leftover colored M&M candy shells that were being processed by a plant 1.55 miles away. Patrick Stewart had already lost all his hair by the age of 18 and thought that no woman would ever be interested in him. Over time, his appearance became one of his most recognizable characteristics as an actor. Decades later, he achieved worldwide fame portraying Captain Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek. The popular belly dance is traditionally performed by both women and men at family gatherings and celebrations in some countries. The two-piece costume commonly associated with it was popularized by Hollywood and later adapted by nightclub dancers in Egypt to attract tourists. The microscopic tardigrade, also known as the water bear or moss piglet, is one of the most resilient creatures in the world. It can go a decade without water. In that state, it reduces almost all of its metabolic activity and shrinks into a kind of dry capsule. It can also survive extreme temperatures, intense radiation, and even the vacuum of space, which has sparked the interest of scientists studying its potential applications in biotechnology. A motorcycle that was dragged out to sea during the Japan tsunami of 2011 was found on a coast in Canada in 2012. The vehicle appeared inside a metal container that had crossed the Pacific Ocean with debris from the disaster. After identifying the Japanese owner, Canadian authorities managed to contact him and tell him about the surprising discovery. Natalie Portman did not attend the premiere of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace because she had to study for her high school final exams. At that time, the actress was still a student at a secondary school in New York and decided to prioritize her studies. Years later, she continued her academic education and graduated in psychology from Harvard University. The Antarctic icefish has no scales and is almost transparent. Instead of having red blood cells to transport oxygen, the oxygen dissolves and diffuses directly into its plasma from the nearly freezing water where it lives, thanks to its large gills and thin skin. It is one of the strangest fish. In almost every episode of the series Adventure Time, a snail appears that sometimes is part of the story and other times is just hidden in the background. It became a tradition to find it waving. When rapper Eminem was a child, he wanted to become a comic book artist. Today, he has a very large collection and even has his own comic book. In 2009, Marvel released a special edition where he appears as a character alongside the Punisher. There was almost a blockbuster amusement park. They had even convinced the Florida government to grant them total control of the area where it would be located, similar to what Disney World has now. But in the end, the plan was never carried out, and Blockbuster went bankrupt. In 1969, an SR-71 Blackbird aircraft, which at the time was the most advanced and cost $34 million, disintegrated mid-flight during a test. This happened because a piece of insulating tape measuring 1.97 inches had been attached, compromising its aerodynamic resistance. There is a musical road in Lancaster, California. It was created as a television advertisement for Honda. The road has grooves cut in such a way that, when traveling at about 50 miles per hour, it plays the William Tell Overture. As part of an experiment, 12 people pretended to have mild auditory hallucinations in order to be admitted to psychiatric hospitals. Once admitted, they began behaving normally, but 11 were incorrectly diagnosed with schizophrenia. The only people who realized they were healthy were the other patients. The Stanley Hotel, which inspired writer Stephen King to write the novel The Shining, has a channel available to all guests that continuously plays Stanley Kubrick's movie based on the novel. It is Channel 42. The movie released in 1925, Ben-Hur, was the most expensive silent film ever made, with a cost of between $4 and $6 million at that time. Hundreds of years ago, people went to sleep early. They woke up for about an hour in the middle of the night to do various activities and then returned to bed for a second period of sleep. Historians have found references to this first and second sleep in diaries, literature, and European medical records from before artificial lighting. The official Twitter account of Sweden is managed by ordinary citizens, who are usually given about 1 week depending on how well their tweets are received. They only need to read a general guide of rules they must follow. The American author and therapist Ruth Westheimer, known as Dr. Ruth, had an unusual youth. When she was a teenager, she received basic defense training as part of the Haganah organization, in a historical context marked by conflicts in the region. Over time, she became a recognized figure in topics of education and personal well-being. Tic Tac candies are named after the sound the container makes every time it is opened and closed. Before 1970, they already existed, but were simply called refreshing mints. If you have delusions in which you believe you are a wolf or another wild animal, you suffer from what is called lycanthropy. In medicine, it is known as clinical lycanthropy, a rare disorder in which the person may feel or claim that they transform into an animal. It is usually associated with psychiatric episodes such as psychotic or neurological disorders, and it has been documented in different cultures throughout history. Even though the works of Shakespeare contain more than 1 million words, only 14 words written by him by hand exist. 12 are his signatures, and the other 2 are by and I. Most of his work survived in printed copies or manuscripts written by other people, which is why authentic examples of his personal handwriting are extremely rare. Lizards have a mechanism in the toes of their feet that allows them to stick and unstick whenever they want without using energy. It is a type of microscopic hair called seta that they can control. Crews on submarines do not use the 24-hour day measurement. On a submarine, a day lasts only 18 hours. The schedule is usually divided into cycles of 6 hours of work, 6 hours of rest, and 6 hours to sleep or perform other tasks. This system helps maintain constant shifts in an environment where there is no natural light. The water left after cooking certain legumes, such as chickpeas or peas, is called aquafaba, and its properties are similar to egg whites. It can be used as a substitute for foods such as meringue or marshmallows. Beer bottles are usually made of brown or green glass. This is to block sunlight and light in general to preserve flavor. Before that, they were all brown, but a shortage of brown glass during World War II caused some companies to use green glass for high-quality beer. In Tim Burton's movie Beetlejuice, Jack Skellington can be seen briefly as part of Beetlejuice's carnival hat during one of his transformations. The movie The Nightmare Before Christmas would not be released until 5 years later, in 1993. In Spain and France, the tooth mouse is a mouse known as la bonne petite souris. The little mouse will collect the teeth left under pillows, replacing them with cash or sweets.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.